So in 1930, Georgia O'Keeffe will start painting, well, really not start painting, it's a series she had been working on earlier, but in this case, she will start painting a very specific series of flowers known as the Jack in the Pulpit series. And the series actually begins with a very basic image. So when she looks at these, what we're looking at, the piece we're going to look at is number 4. But when she starts, it's a pure botanical study. So we see on the left, this is Jack in the Pulpit number 1, and it looks like something you would see in a biology textbook. It's pretty straightforward. But as she moves down the line to Jack in the Pulpit number 6, which we see on the right, you see that it gets more and more abstracted. And that's where we get into some interesting issues. So, Jack in the Pulpit number 4 represents a midpoint in the process of concurrently increasing detail and abstraction. Thus, in Jack in the Pulpit, abstraction becomes a metaphor of and equivalent for knowledge. The closest view of the flower yields an abstract image. The most profound knowledge of the subject reveals an abstract form. And what she's getting at is sort of what is a flower, at least at some base level. And when you think of the characteristics that make a flower, they're what? Their color, their delicacy, their form. That's what she's focusing on. And as she gets deeper into the abstraction, we get to know the flower at a different level, at less of a surface level, and this, instead this incredible level of depth. Now, there has been some controversy and discussion about O'Keeffe's flowers because they do tend to look an awful lot like female genitalia. Now, this is not accepted by all scholars. It's a split right now in the field, whether this is what she's doing or not. But consider this. In the 1920s and 1930s, could she actually depict concepts of gender or concepts of genitalia without hiding it? And to add to that, to make this more difficult, these are the pieces Stieglitz wants her to paint. And then when interviewed later, Stieglitz will talk to the New York Times, for example, and the reporter will say, hey, by the way, is Georgia O'Keeffe really painting her genitalia? And he's going to go, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, no, of course not. By which I mean she is. He's going to play it up. And so that's going to play into this as well. And it's possible she's trying to deal with gender identity or identity in general because she is a woman who we are told is sterile. So we tend to see voids and openings in her paintings that reflect the idea of an empty womb. We see a lot of different ideas here. And could she be playing with that idea of gender identity? Sure. That is absolutely possible, that she's hiding it in flowers so that it's not obvious and it becomes more acceptable. It's also possible that they're just flowers. I should point out that Georgia O'Keeffe herself tells the media they're just flowers. But again, in the 1930s, she can't come out and say, hey, by the way, this is my vulva. Because if she does, she will immediately be, I don't know that kicked out is the right term, but she's going to be ostracized in the art world because this is too early. If she does it in the 1970s, it's a whole nother ball game. But in the 1930s, this is why there's still the controversy. This is why artists and art critics still go back and forth today about what the imagery is and what it means.